PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me for this episode is Tony Topping. Tony, how you doing, sir?
Hey, hello, Adam. I'm all right, mate. It's good to see you. Can you hear me all right?
I hear you perfectly.
Does that sound okay?
You sound
Great.
perfect, Tony. So let's start with this. Let's talk about your endeavors in ufology and how you got there.
Well, yes. I mean, my endeavors in ufology, I'm kind of like the lone wolf guy. I get smiled at by Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe. My name my name isn't big in lights yet. I have a very unique and big following because of the information that I've kind of like been, well, not the information, the situation that I've been subjected to over the years, which has resulted in contact with those behind the UFOs. And the result of my recent book, I, Alien, Memoirs of a UFO Spy, which is a fascinating journey into my contact experiences, written as fiction to protect the innocent. There's 97 illustrations in it. It's quite a read. I'm very proud of it. It took 4 to 3 years to do it because I've got post-traumatic stress disorder. So that makes the mental health side of it, it kind of like was a hard slog at them. But we got there. I'm very proud of it. The art is a forensic witness kind of thing to the aliens that I saw. And I think we can safely say to the listeners, we are being lied to. We are not being invaded by them. The issues around that are very complex, but we're not being invaded by them. They look like us, we look like them. A number of issues arose during the course of my experiences spanning 40 years. Certain elements, which I'll get into later, that just did my head in, that I couldn't handle. That were more human than alien to deal with, actually. But we'll get into that, Adam. And I began life in a town in Yorkshire. I was 10 years of age. My book starts with me going to a scrapyard at 10 in 1980s Britain because my mum and dad had no money. We lived in a house with no heating, no bathing facilities. I was abused often. And there's me heading to a scrapyard with scrap to sell to the scrap man because my mum and dad are broke. And that's how my book begins. And then I get into probably one of the, what I would class as one of the greatest contact stories that ever told, one of the most iconic and unique. As I say, written as fiction to protect the innocent, because had I written it as fact, the going would have been very hard for me. So I've done it as fiction to put the secret in plain view, Adam. Does that make sense?
It does. It's smart, too, because you're protecting other people that don't want the exposure.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. There has been what happened really when the book began. Well, not really, I suppose, on the book. The whole circus, the whole experience began in about 1997, as my book portrays. Where, I mean, I was having strange goings on before then, but we'll say about 97, where we had some very strange paranormal incidents occur that would indicate, and having pieced it together, it's taken me years to understand. It would appear that the people doing the paranormal incidents knew I'd written this book before I had. And what is so unique about the book, therefore, is the people in it that I portray, whether human or alien, knew I'd written this book before I had. And it sits there at the moment online like a silent witness to events, doing nothing. But yet it's a mighty thing, and it's sat like a silent witness. And you don't get power like that, Adam, moving around, not doing anything. It's sat there for a purpose now. It's just calmly sat there online, getting rave reviews. I'm really pleased. The reviews on it have been really good, So I'm plugging the hell out of it at the moment. Why not?
No, that's what we're here for, right? Get it out there, get the information out there. Like you said, the observers upon us, in my opinion, benign. We're a science project. We're a study. We're entertainment. We're basically a channel, in my opinion. We're one channel of many channels of planets out there with life that's either equivalent to us or primitive. Or
yes, absolutely. I mean, according to them, during the course of my experience, they estimated there was about 50 groups of them out there. There could be more. I know Clifford Stone, if guys and girls don't know him, looking up. He said during his course in the army, when he was recovering UFOs under, I think, Project Pounce, he indicated there was about 57 of them out there, hence the Heinz 57. But there was something I discovered. I had 40 years experience of this at the sharp end. I know my landscape. And there was something that occurred in the book, or rather that happened to me, that I still can't get my head around, Adam. I really can't. I don't know whether it's good to introduce it now or later in the interview, but I still can't get my head around it. Just can't. It's interesting, to say the least. And it kind of like is in tandem with events. It really is. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil the book, but equally, I want to be interesting with it, if you get me drift.
No, I understand. Yeah. I would say let's do this. Let's start with your contact experience, when it started, and how frequent was it taking place?
Yes, that's right. Well, because I've got a bit of PTSD going on, Adam, I can get disorientated with what I'm saying quite easily because I'm traumatized by what happened to me. But on saying that, matey, I manage it quite well. And if we were to start anywhere, when this all first began, I think we could say at the age of 2, when we had a bizarre incident of what can only be described as the visions of something walking through a wall, me screaming at my father going, what the hell was that? Him going, there's nothing there, when there clearly was. And it was to do with trumpets. There was trumpet sounds with this, which is very interesting because the final chapter in my book is called Optonal Gaia. Take the scene, I'll get back into the UFO bit, but you take the scene from Close Encounters, where they're on Devil's Mountain using a tonal vocabulary to communicate with UFOs. Put that on steroids, and imagine that it's aliens communicating a tonal vocabulary with the planetary being itself. You imagine that? So you're going from one thing to another. That is what I found incredible. But I won't get into that now. I'll just move back now into the narrative of the UFOs coming in over the house. About 97, it all started. In 1997, I'd moved back from London. And at the time, and I've done quite an accurate picture of her as well, at the time I saw my first alien in about 97. And I was deeply shocked by what I saw. I mean, she looked nothing like they say they look like in the media. She looked the picture of health, triangulated face, beautiful. I think, were they blue eyes? The eyes were so unique. I mean, the eyes were so bright and healthy. It was as if they were on an independent power source. That was the thing. Radiated physical health. She was tying her hair back at the time, and she turned round to me and said, "How do I look?" It turns out in the drawing that I've done, in the artwork I've done for her, it turns out that she's part of a maritime extraterrestrial group. And what is unique about them, so they told me in the years of experience this all is that they share a parallel universe to us where oceans can be utilized in that universe, in the parallel universe, and they can come into our Earth and use our oceans. It's as if water has the same code, whether we're in a parallel or whether we're in our universe. The creator plays an incredible game of creation. And so that was really my first kind of alien incident. And then we had bizarre paranormal warfare type incidents going on during 1997. One such incident I describe in my book can only be described as a time traveler looking back at me in like a dome, in like a bubble. Very serious look on his face. And I think he was human. I think he was military. I don't think he was from this time. And he was aware I'd written the book before I had. And it all centres, it appears, around this book. And then we had some hair-raising experiences in 97, which were quite brutal. One such incident, Adam, was very bizarre. It was like my mind was like in the Matrix or in the time continuum, and these beings were being attacked by something that was like a ball of light. They used to follow me a lot, these ball of light UFOs, throwing out thousands of darts at these. I don't know what it was, actually. I really don't. So these are the very earliest experiences in about 97, and I didn't know what the hell was going on, mate. And I was wandering around traumatized for days, not a clue why it was happening. And then it dramatically escalated in about 1999 when the UFOs themselves started coming in over the house, doing the flying circus routine. That was absolutely unbelievable, Adam.
A couple of things. With the oceans, I all the reports I read, a lot of activity over water, great bodies of water. I later find out that if we were going to do something like, let's say, our technology, and we wanted to maybe go to a parallel universe or utilize a warp, the fluid of water would be a good lubricant. One. Two, the little balls of light, I think those are their recon drones. So when they're making it, and I say this because this is what we would do. If we're gonna go observe a group of individuals in this day and age with our technology, we're sending drones out ahead of us to do the recon work to find out if it's worthy of subject study or is it worthy of us going there to begin with. There's a lot of parallels with ufology and the paranormal. I'm finding a lot. And I said this in a lot of other podcasts. A lot of people that have had direct contact, they state, between the ages of 2 and 6 years old is in the beginning. And a lot of naysayers want to say, well, how could you possibly remember that? Well, the answer is when you have something that affects you profoundly, you print. When you're a child, we print. Those are the ages where we recognize faces, whether they be good or bad, and it prints upon us whom that might be. That's my caretaker. I have to make noises to be fed. So in the case of when you're a child and you're hearing what sounds like trumpets, I'm not even starting to believe if it's kind of moving to a kind of a science fact. A lot has to do in the paranormal and ufology and even in science. Vibrations and frequencies play a great role. And depending on how you perceive and hear it, it could sound like anything, right? Because whatever the frequency they utilize to contact you or communicate or even come around you, that's what it's echoing in your inside of your skull, and that's what you're hearing at that point. So to the credit of what you're saying, I hear a lot of this, a lot. I do a lot of off podcast interviews with people that don't want to be, socially recognized for part of the phenomena. The similarities are incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Yes. There's clearly an agenda to discredit it. The agenda to discredit what you're saying, Adam, which is absolutely spot on, is present. It's fascist. You can't say too much about it, but there is an agenda to make sure that type of information, what you're talking about, is oppressed in the public domain for all the wrong reasons. Absolutely all the wrong reasons. And that's to do with it's alien meets biblical meets angels and demons with mankind in the center of it. It certainly is. And as I think the scientist Edward Bell Bruno, Dr. Edward Bell Bruno, kept quiet when he was in NASA about his alien contact situation, but he claims to have had contact with them. As he recently said, not recently said, but as he said, during his experience, he was being shown a roadmap, a way forward by them. And that's what mankind is being shown at the moment. It's being shown a roadmap, even at this early stage of contact and all that kind of thing. It's being shown a roadmap. And I think you're talking a time span of about 150 years by the time the governments of we the people start liaising with them, if you would call it we the people. But at the moment, there is, Adam, in place a vile, disgusting cover-up, causing what could only be described as an alien Cold War. You have one faction of ET that dictates to mankind what they see of them, where they go, and how much information should be revealed. And then you have the other branch of ET that is against that and is openly in our skies, openly wanting to communicate. And that goes against the fascist diktat. That goes against it. And so you've got this conflict going on. So, for example, the United States Navy would not disclose that there is alien life in the ocean. They would not disclose that they could gain technology. The navigation systems alone of those undersea UFOs are incredible, as are their propulsion systems. They're based on a technology that we do not possess. And they're being dictated to, for example, as human beings, to keep that all quiet for very nefarious reasons. And therefore, that is being challenged. So there is that thing that Lou Elizondo comes out with, isn't there, in your country's press, and they're all on the Kool-Aid with it, really, where they go, we do not know what they are. Well, they do know what they are. They're fully aware of what they are, have been for 40 years, and are continuing to lie their asses off about it for nefarious reasons, for reasons that even they aren't clear on as to why they're lying.
You know, a big part of that, too,
Yeah.
Here's a big part of that. You can't deny UFOs anymore. They're real.
No.
Fact, right?
They are.
The question mark for the majority of the public, right? The question mark there is what's controlling it, what's here. The government, both United States government and other westernized governments, I'm pretty sure NATO in agreement, the part of the cover-up is not even so much a cover-up, but it's a great scapegoat. We can now test our programs. We can send spy things over to Russia and China and blame it on UFOs. It's very easy to do so. And like Lou Elizondo, if... I can't even say that was a leak. I don't think he leaked that information because you know how if the government doesn't want you to put something out there, you're not going to do it. Period.
No.
They have amazing resources, right? One example is like Snowden. He whistle blew on some, and he had to run it go into hiding. Whereas Lou Elizondo is very free to roam, free to do what he pleases, and respectfully, he's honoring his oath. He's not speaking everything as he can.
Yes.
But a large part of the cover-up, and you touched on it earlier, religion has a huge part of that, right? Because there's a lot of power and control in religion. I mean, you're talking about an institution where they have palaces in their own countries with multi-million-dollar fixtures within each one. I highlight the Vatican as an example, right? That's a palace. That's not a church. So the big issue with ufology, it's not so much disclosure. And I say this a lot. It's acknowledgement. Because if the government would just be more forthright and just acknowledge the existence at a grander level, it would allow other professionals in the world, both in law enforcement, former law enforcement, military, they could come forward with their stories. Because it's said, again, at this point, we know UFOs are real. The question mark is now what's controlling them. And earlier you said the being that you've encountered looked a little different, had hair tied back. Well, here's the other big thing, too, in ufology. We don't acknowledge the idea that there might be multiple races, that the little gray guys that everyone sees they're the smaller biological robots that do the work, and they're rented to other species for study purposes. And just like you said, some of these UFOs, we cannot detect them without certain significant instruments, and others are just blatant. And it's because, I think, personally, the David Fravor incident, I think that UFO is not only... letting us see it, but it was kind of showboating a bit, right? This is what we got.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it was. And absolutely they are. I mean, when they started coming in over my house in about 1999, they started doing aerobatics that, and it's all on video and it's all in the book. We've had the image analysis done on it. One image I'm not sure of, but all the rest of them I'm absolutely fine with. They started coming in over the house. There's images of it, Adam, in my book. I'll email you the images. And the first one that happened in 1999 is of this UFO coming in over my house and illuminating a TV antenna. And the constant theme of these UFOs coming in over my house and going near my ham radio antennas is quite intentional. There was one incident where one UFO in particular, which I think was part of the maritime group, morphed itself so that it flew through the antenna and then flew out the other side of it as if nothing happened, demonstrating a technology we don't have. There was another incident where one of these UFOs, I was filming what I believe to be a triangle UFO, and it kind of like had another UFO come in from the left, rotate around it 360 degrees and fly off at tremendous speed. I am not sure whether that was part of the triangle structure of the UFO, but they were clearly demonstrating a physics and an aerobatics that we do not have. It was quite intentional what they were doing. They don't do anything without intent. And then we had the further incidents going on where they kept flying near the radio antennas because they were wanting to establish communication. And they did, and they have, and it's ongoing. I would suggest, because we're not going by the rules of time, as we would normally suspect, I'm not sure whether I think that those incidents over my house triggered the foundation of what will be in the future with them. Regardless, I think, of whether we like it or not, the creator of heaven, as we call it, is pushing forward with the agenda of humanity to communicate with them, to understand them. They're out there, they're evolved. highly evolved, Adam. It shocked me what they look like. They look like us. We look like them. That's the biggest lie of all, that everybody thinks they look like little green men from Mars. They do not. The women, particularly the alien women, play pivotal roles in this. And I've got a whole wall collage here of them, of the various women that I witnessed that were ET. And they play a pivotal role in it. And I would suggest, Adam, and this is a bold remark to make, I don't know what the major chat shows are in the US. On here, we've got something called Loose Women in the UK. I suggest you could get one of those ladies on one of those chat shows. She could sit down and she could actually explain the hopes and fears of living on her world with her children like women of Earth. That's a very bold statement to make, but it's a true statement. I stand by it that could possibly happen. But there's no room for that in the fascist oppression of we do not know what they are, is there?
Well, a couple of things to say is we would, before we even come to the point where we're going to communicate with them, we have to correct ourselves as a species.
Yes.
We have too much division, whether it be some form of ideology in politics, religion. For whatever reason, race is still a factor. Mind blowing. So for these beings to come here to observe, to demonstrate the technology they have, they didn't do it as an individual. They did it as a species. They had to accomplish something so great, whether it be transversing space and or going through portals. That requires the greater minds of one species to come together and collaborate. They're not sending
Adam.
They're not sending low levels here. I mean, so that's the biggest problem we have is our separation, our division here on planet Earth. I know an example would be if you and I go to another country and we find the indigenous people there are warlike and we're trying to promote some form of peace. It's very unlikely that we're going to accomplish that in a small amount of time. It might even take, decades at our scale of time before they even become to that point of more peaceful existence. Because imagine going back in time, right, Tony? We go back to the ancient Greeks and Alexander's conquering, territory. Do you think if we went back in time, even with our technology, do you think we could sit down with him and explain peace to him? He wouldn't want to hear that. That's not the mindset he has.
No, it's not the mindset. But when you think about it, Adam, when you look at the occult symbology in our society at the moment, in the pop industry, all from my view as a contact experiencer and somebody who's been involved in secretive stuff, there is an indication that something non-human is manipulating mankind to do this chaos. You only need to look at the lunatic in the Kremlin and what's going on in Ukraine at the moment to understand that there is a manipulative hand going on to which something non-human is causing this. And there is clear conflict in those from the skies above that are coming here as opposed to what's causing these issues. I know that in the course of 40 years of dealing with this, that these beings behind these UFOs have come here for the children of humanity, and they don't like politicians. They do not like them. And it's interesting to note, I'll just make a caveat here, Adam. I totally disagree with Russia's actions in Ukraine. Totally.
Indeed.
So I've got to say that because I'm getting into what the Russian psychic units knew. But I don't want to sound as if I'm bigging them up in some way. I think their conduct is appalling. Russia developed a psychic warfare unit called Troop 10,000, Special Abilities Unit 10,003, under the leadership of a man called Alexei Savin. There, I went on a hunt. This is of interest to your listeners. This was via Joseph McMoneagle, who knew of my experiences because I come under the banner of an exceptional human experiencer. Your readers may look, what's the name? Gracious me. They need to, if they're putting exceptional human experiences, EHE, and there's a doctor that actually wrote about a number of documents about this for the CIA on people who have these exceptional paranormal experiences. Joseph McMoneagle I was communicating with Joe McMoneagle, who is US remote viewer #1, highly decorated guy. He said, get in contact with my KGB counterpart, Alexei Savin. He'll tell you more about his unit's contact with aliens in Russia. Well, it was unbelievable. I found nothing about him anywhere, but I dug deep, and dug deeper still, and came across, Adam, a whole treasure trove of classified information regarding what this Russian unit was doing. And it is not advertised anywhere that Project Stargate, the US remote viewing program, was in active liaison with the Russian unit. They were doing joint operations together. Joseph McMarigal was even assisting Alexei Savin. This is never talked about anywhere, that the Russian and American psychic warfare units, they opposed each other on the one hand, but cooperated with each other on the other hand. And what is interesting is during the data I discovered, which you can't, it's secret as I understand it, you can't put it online, but it is there. And I read it. I was very lucky in that sense. They are... Alexei Savin used female information channel operators, known as remote viewers in the US and the Russian equivalent. He used women because their intuition was better, they had better results, all that kind of thing. An interesting thing that came, one of the female kind of Russian remote viewers was communicating with these female ETs, who said that they don't need the United Nations. They don't need government officialdom to meet human beings. They can meet them on a street corner if they wanted to. It's just that, back to what you said, Adam, it's just that it appears, I get the impression from these beings, that government, they're not the biggest fan of human governments and what they're doing. And that is the issue. And you could see this whole data from this classified Russian unit of their operatives having contact with these ETs, who were more or less just frowning on the fact that they wouldn't turn up on humanity's doorstep with a blazing fanfare and all that kind of thing. One of the operatives was deliberately misled by one ET group, and it's unique, Adam, because I've got a unique perspective on this. So we could see all this data coming out of Russia about all this, and they'd really, really educated themselves on it at the Russians. They'd really understood the dynamics of information channel operating, as they call it, remote viewing, info quant, that energy is quantums of information. And yet we have this corruption, this genocide behavior, this modus operandi coming out of Russia, which is similar to World War II. And that is not a coincidence. That's a modus operandi of something. It's the same predictable format of dictator, destruction, all that kind of thing. And when we get into the book, I talk about something called Optonal Gaia, as I say, where I'm very proud of the chapter where you're hearing communication with the planet as if it's like doing a tonal vocabulary with some very advanced technology. It's as if the ET had linked into it and were reading data like you would plug in a USB. Oh my. And what I witnessed, Adam, which I think is important, and people can say I'm off my rock, I don't bloody care, it's what I witnessed. I've had 40 years of this and I just don't give a toss anymore about what people think. What I witnessed was this kind of, they'd used me as some sort of interface. And it was like they'd plugged me in like a USB stick to the Earth, and the Earth's giving them data, but it was like this agony, this tonal sound of complete agony and upset. And I got the impression that every bomb, every gunfire, every act of violence that was going on was hurting the Earth beyond human comprehension, and that there was a risk that the Earth would turn on us. There was a very real risk of this. And this communication was going on. It was incredible. And you could hear one half, which must have been the planetary being sending tonal, and the ET sending a more soothing tonal communication back to it. It was incredible. I tell you what, if it gets to film, Adam, it would make a tremendous cinematic experience. Get the audio right, get the Dolby all set up and have just to communicate what it was. It was the sadness and the fact that we weren't aware of what we were doing to the planet, and the planet was being hurt. It was an unbelievable moment, Adam, to share with you.
Well, we're definitely seeing proof of that, right? Because whenever you alter too much something on the planet, like when we emit too much carbon, it starts heating the planet up.
Yeah, of course.
Some of the other footprint, like the forest, we're destroying forests. And we're seeing the oxygen percentages not as great as they once upon a time were.
Yes.
On top of which, what you're saying about being a part of a USB, people, again, there's naysayers say, oh, it sounds crazy. Well, we tag animals and people all the time to collect data.
Don't we?
So understand, when we have National Geographics and we're out studying like lions, the rules are pretty clear. Don't get involved directly. It doesn't matter what's happening. Even if the cubs are being killed by another pride, we're there to observe. Unless we hit them with the car, then we're obligated. It's because we interfered. But for as far as the abduction phenomena and people being tracked, these are things we do. We do these things we abduct animals all the time. We abduct how many people, and I mean, we can't say, specifically, but you can't deny that our government, or any government for that matter, China involved or Russia, that we don't, abduct a person from that nation and perhaps put a chip in them or some way to monitor them or get them close to collecting data in the name of national security. We do these things all the time. So it's not crazy to say that aliens would do it. It's exactly what we do. Just they do it with a more sophisticated technology. That's the only separation.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you, Adam. And I mean, I've covered that as some very bizarre incidents in my book of as if something quite advanced had plugged into the subconscious collective of the whole planet during COVID and was listening for reasons I do not understand. But I won't get into that, but I will say that there is. What I will get into is the bit where I was indeed nearly abducted, and that was where I think it went all biblical and angels and demons for me. I don't think what I witnessed was alien, but at the time I'd written this book, Adam, and there is a bizarre paradox, which is something to do. How can I put it into words? I have to be very careful what I say. One party claims that my book is the work of imagination, but yet has been present for a very long time in an alien Cold War. Why would they even bother to do that? Why would they even bother to say that when, in fact, the interactions going on are quite correct? They appear to be navigating a platform for humanity, whether anybody likes it or not. I remember, Adam, at the time, I was in my flat here in Southport, and I was nearly abducted by I would describe it as a grey. Now, I thought that I've seen a lot. I've seen these ETs, but I thought that a grey was something that was made up. These things are quite real and quite nasty. But what is interesting is when it happened to me, the whole of reality around me was being warped in its present. I was like being pushed back in time. And what this thing did is, from my childhood past, because I had quite an abusive past, I used to speak a lot of word salad. There's a famous TV program in the UK called The Magic Roundabout. And I used to come out with a saying from that program. Don't know why, as a child, it was like a word salad. So what you've got is a scenario where this thing is now literally using this as if I'm in some sort of, as if I'm in some sort of test apparatus, like in the James Bond movie that's going at full G. There's a famous scene in a James Bond film where he's in one of these test apparatuses and they sabotage it and he's spinning round at speed and it won't stop. And that's what was happening to me. This word salad was spinning at speed and it wouldn't stop. You'll feel the bloody thing near me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is real. Next minute, I know in this living room, there was a power of depths and magnitude, of love and serenity, and it was powerful. And it occupied this room and prevented me from being taken. And I believe that was more biblical than alien. And the issue then became, Adam, that you've got something like that, which I would call the creator of worlds, compacted into a living room. That's now going to start radiating harmonics here, there, and everywhere into parallels because it's part of the power that created the whole shebang in the first place. And I was saved by it, and I will never forget that incident. And I don't talk about what happened afterwards regarding that because it's quite not pleasant. But it demonstrates to me that there is a divine power there. It is watching over humanity, and there is hope. Because there's a lot of negativity out there. And that's what happened to me at the time. What was interesting is during the course of that happening, the Nordic extraterrestrials, who have been key players in all this, they really have. It's as if, Adam, when we're talking about Project Bluebeam and we're going to be invaded and this, that, and the other, there's 57 groups of some sort of alliance out there watching. It would be very difficult for one extraterrestrial group to pull off a Project Blue Beam and invade us. It just wouldn't happen. But they're using it, aren't they, Adam? I'm sure you would agree. They're using it as some sort of ulterior motive behind that, about an alien invasion. They couldn't pull it off, mate. It would be impossible to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, a couple, you know, to add to that, if they were going to invade us, they would definitely not do it when we had nuclear weapons. They could have done it many times over, very long. We know through study, they've been observing us for what seems like thousands of years, right?
Absolutely.
Once upon a time, we called them gods and chariots. So I don't think we're going to be invaded. I think, however, we're part of a study. And I think the only motivation they have for us not to, you know, self-destruct is so they don't lose their channel. They don't lose their study. However, again, like the little gray aliens, I really think those are biological robots being utilized by other beings to come to the ground level, because not every race is going to be able to breathe our air. Like, I
don't entirely agree after 40 years of dealing with them. By the way, Adam, you might be right, but in real life and dealing with them is very different to what's been written online about them.
Right.
They're viewed as some sort of alien North Korea within the greater scheme of things. 57 groups out there. It's not all going to be plain sailing. If they disclose their existence, mankind, being as we are, it is not going to be plain sailing with them. It just isn't. It's not all fluffy. I don't think it will be. You know, the Nordics, for example, they look like us, we look like them, but they're blue and blonde-eyed. That might not work out correctly in some areas. There might even be with the Nordics, for example, who everybody thinks they come from they come from Andromeda. But, you know, with the Nordics, they have kind of like command structures. They have criminal command structure. It's kind of like it goes on. So we've got to see a big civilization like that is being denied by our governments, has its own issues to deal with. And it's not going to be plain sailing, I think, if humanity does meet them. I just don't think it will be. And then there's the other curious issue, Adam, of the key to when I said the harmonics in the room and the big power thing in this room preventing me from being abducted. I'll get into the incident that happened to me, which is in the book, which I still cannot get my head around. And I've had 40 years of ET contact.
Sure.
And I just can't get my head around it, mate. And I'll start that story for your listeners if you wish.
Yes, yeah, by all means.
Yeah, well, so what it is that there's been these incidents since 97. There was a major incident in my book that I thought involved kind of time travel and involved like the San Francisco Bay Area of the US. Basically, my book is all about my experiences from my journals. The journals give a time and date of paranormal incidents that seem to be part of an operation that I couldn't understand. I left them on my shelf for years. I lost my mother. I looked after her for 8 years with dementia. In the same year, which is 2018, I lost my mother to dementia. I had to have major hernia surgery to prevent gangrene, and I had to move house to another town because I'd lost the house I lived in Yorkshire. All in the same year, I nearly cracked up. At one point in the proceedings, I was wandering around with mental exhaustion and nearly collapsing. It was a nightmare. And on this particular day, I remember it quite well. I was sat on the bench near the Marine Lake here in Southport, and I remember quite distinctly a triangle UFO coming in over me with 3 pink lights. And I remember this exhaustion and this pain and depression being lifted from me. And I remember seeing later on, without going into too much detail, seeing who was behind that, which was like a beautiful alien ET woman with this real peaceful vibe about her. I was flabbergasted. She was gorgeous. I'll never forget her. And they indicated to me that the New Age thinking on Earth is that they are Arcturians, but they're not. They're nearer Bootes, she was telling me. Nearer the Bootes constellation, and they like to do recreational driving like we do on Earth. For the most bizarre carry on, Adam, but the contact is quite genuine. But on saying that, in all the occult books, in all the esoteric secrets, this is never mentioned what happened. And what happened was this. Due to this incident in the living room and it radiating harmonics here, there, and everywhere, I was involved in this strange dream. And the dream was about, at the time I was ill with flu, happened about 2 years ago. And I was in a strange dream trying to find my original house in Yorkshire, and I could not see it. And it was interesting. This woman came to me on a bike in this dream. I say, sorry, I'm lost. Where am I? She went, the year is 1997. You are in a parallel universe in Oxford in the parallel version of the United Kingdom. And I couldn't, I was flabbergasted with what she said. And then it started, Adam, with little hints and glimpses of information from them. But I won't go about into it too much, it's all in the book, but I've got to be careful what I say here. But basically, there was a mystery to this with them. And the mystery, so they told me, it was this: they're in a parallel. So there's like a parallel universe to humanity. We look like us, they look like them. They're classed as an ET civilization, even though they're like us. But one of the things that she came out with was there was a mysterious barrier between us and them, similar to the Iron Curtain. And the mystery was, Adam, who put it there is their enduring mystery. Who placed it there?
Right.
That was the thing. And as true as I am, God be my witness, these are people like us in a parallel universe, and I'm blown away that there is no occult teaching on it, no hint, no indication. The nearest indication is by a guy called Robert Dean, Staff Sergeant Robert Dean, who's now no longer with us. Have you heard of him?
I'm familiar with the name.
Familiar with the name Robert Dean. He, for your listeners, he got up at he started sending out information that he was involved with Shape Headquarters NATO. And he gave this lecture in the UK for UFO Magazine about the NATO assessment, where NATO had seen UFOs coming in and thought they were Russia. Russia thought the UFOs were NATO. It nearly went to World War III. And so they did this thing called the assessment. And it's like what you said, Adam, earlier. They concluded that we were part of an experiment. They concluded that these aliens have been interacting with us for a very long time. But he said that the bit that panicked the generals and admirals the most was there were ET out there that looked like us, he said. And he just didn't mean like us, he meant exactly like us, but from another area, from another zone, from another world. And that worried the admirals and generals a great deal, he said. And I've witnessed it, and I can't get my head around it, Adam. And that's the only thing after 40 years of dealing with all this. That's just something I cannot get my head around, mate.
You know, there's a lot of scientists exploring the idea of parallel existences here on Earth. Just an example being, there's the theory that, we're in 2022, but parallel to us right now, 1959 is still running. Right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So there's this scary idea that I'd spoken about on a podcast a number of times, that when we were testing nuclear ordnance over, vacant areas in the desert, that you're basically using an energy that could, cross the barrier of physics. So what if we're testing it in the desert and we're actually nuking a full society in a parallel? Because it's, you're harnessing the power of the sun in there, right?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and the bigger part of that is, here's another thing I read recently. We now know that atoms here and atoms across the universe can simultaneously exist together, right? They
correct.
So if we were to, the only thing that would change is if we acknowledge it.
Correct.
So there's a strong idea that and I've spoken to a lot of people, Steve Merp in particular, about the frequencies and the vibrations.
Yeah.
The demonstration of their technology may not be of what we think of it, right? Like we think of jets and how we're going to fly through the air, the sound barrier. No UFO has ever broken the sound barrier, none. So how they're operating might not just be that it's propulsion, rather it's space time. And if they're utilizing space time to maneuver for what we see, imagine what they could do as far as going between parallels. It's not comprehensible for us, but we can't naysay it. There's a lot of scientists right now looking at the idea of a parallel existence here and now. And as far as religion, I don't people call it God. I just call it an architect, a very higher being, right? Absolutely. Like an energy because when you look at a cosmic web and how everything connects, and then you look at a human brain and just a tissue of a leaf or a spider web, everything has a very similar construct. It's pretty universal. So as far as what you're saying about there being parallels, I could subscribe to that, because I honestly believe if we ever figure out time travel, it's not going to be about going forward or backward through time, rather how to cross the parallel to get back to a certain date and time. Now, the problem there is, if you learn this and let's say you figure out the parallel existence and you go back to, say, 1994, you may not be there, but that is 1994 in its whole, right? So things might be different in that timeline, in that existence. So it's a lot to comprehend, but I agree with you in a lot of it. There's a lot we still don't understand about here, let alone
there is. And I know this mysterious lady on a bike, it makes sense when she said it was 97. It makes sense that they will be back from us, because I understand some of the latest findings from NASA. You might know more about this than me, Adam, but basically they'd found, had they not, from research, a parallel universe going slower in time than us, or going in reverse time from us.
Right.
They'd found that up, they'd reached some conclusions. And there's a guy who at Caltech who'd done a report a few years ago about the fact that he strongly also believed, by measuring radio astronomy on the hydrogen lines and so on, that there was a parallel universe attached to ours. It was like two bubbles joined together, and evidence from radio astronomy actually suggested that. So when they come over this barrier and start communicating, that's wild, and it's something you've got to be, I think, very responsible with, because it may be that there's something out there that doesn't want people to know that, full stop, doesn't want the reality of the man in the high castle, if you've ever seen that one. Have you seen the man in the high castle?
No, I haven't.
Okay, man in the high castle, just so your listeners don't know, basically Japan and Germany have invaded America, and they have taken it over, and it is now under their military rule. Somebody discovers a videotape or a film, somebody discovers in a shed videotape film footage of the fact of the Germans losing World War II and the Allies taking over Germany and D-Day in another world. Do you get me, Adam? So,
yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's incredible. It's Man in a High Castle, it's called. And it I just found the parallels of that amazing. Who's to know, Adam, in the course of my experiences, because you have to be your own self-critic, and who's to know that the military are larking around with some sort of very advanced mind-invasive technology? In 2014, for example, I first caught a glimpse of the Nordic aliens, the Nordic ET. What a bloody outfit they are. I'll never forget them. Well, they're still there. It's still all ongoing with them. And I will never forget what happened on that day in 2014, as if the world was being warned by them. And in my book, I talk about the SCOVS network, SCOVS being Special Contact Operation Very C meaning we from the future verify what you see. And in this wild science fiction narrative that I've written from my book, which I'm very proud of, there is a distinct possibility that human beings from our world begin to liaise with human beings from the parallel world, and it's a very interesting result, and form a network of communication with other ETs, therefore saving our planet. It appears our planet is very, very important in the grand scheme of things. And so that's the plot running through it, based on true events. So the times and dates in my journals that I was going to throw in the bin in rage at the loss of my mother, I didn't know what to do with them. I was sat there for years, was sat there as silent witnesses. They knew what they were going to do. They knew where they were going to go. And I've done this incredible book with my pictures in, and the day-by-day torture under the MK Ultra mind control that went on, and the times and dates of liaison, and the fact that you had agencies in different time frames doing different things, and, you know, being targeted by your own kind in MK Ultra style mind invasive technology, and then suddenly realizing that it was far bigger than that as the plot reads, is quite incredible. It's quite incredible, Adam, that I wrote it because I thought I never would. You know, so there you go. You know, it's unbelievable.
The MK Ultra. So I really haven't touched on that much. I'm gonna start researching it a little bit, because I've had someone. I had a friend of mine, Rick Warner, send me an article about MK Ultra, and I began reading it. And then when you start looking at some of the government programs we admit to having from the past, You can't say anything sounds crazy or impractical. We know to a certainty that our government's experimented with mind control efforts. Everything we have as pleasure today, whether it be the internet or GPS or Bluetooth, all came from military applications long before they were publicly used. So everything that we consider to be impossible, you got to think about how our technology in just 120 years is leapfrogging bounds and bounds. So I have to make room for the idea that our government would utilize anything. I mean, if tomorrow a government official found a way to communicate with a ghost in the paranormal sense, believe me, we're going to employ that for spy purposes, right? Because it's always got to be militarized before it could be for any other use.
Well, they did have them under something called MK often. Often we achieve our goals, often we do not. It was the CIA's program before remote viewing, before Project Stargate. It's called MK often. And oddly enough, I'm a big fan of this. They also formed an agency. Everybody talks of Majestic 12, but actually there was another agency called the Collins Elite. I've communicated with some guys who were involved in that. It was the demonic component of UFOs. There's a demonic element to them. It gets all biblical and angelic and all that kind of thing. And they formed this agency called the Collins Elite. And it's from there that they, there was lunacy going on with MK often because they were trying to communicate with dead agents using telepathy, using all that kind of thing. And then suddenly discovered to the horror that it was kind of like not a good thing to do. And so they consulted various vicars and pastors across America about all this and came up with a very accurate picture under something that, in fact, the guy I communicated with was a guy called, it's in my book, was a guy called Pastor Ray Boesch, who advised elements of the DIA, the Department of DIA, is it Defense Intelligence Agency? That's right. Advised your DIA that he was approached by them. They wanted to know about this demonic component, and they had a term for these beings, which was known as NHE, or non-human entities, and they are real, Adam. And when we look at accounts of contactees who've had experiences with aliens, one very interesting remark from the ET is in a book by Alec Newald called Co-Evolution. And these ETs, he was off to Auckland in New Zealand and he disappeared for 10 days and then re-arrived again 50 miles from where he should be. He was recalling various incidents. He said he'd been abducted by these beings who were in another dimension. And there was an indication from these beings that the Earth is ruled by a dark force, but it is a form of life that must be respected. And this is interesting because what they were zoning in on, the Collins Elite, were non-human entities in another realm, in another dimension that's running right within our world. I mean, doesn't run parallel, it runs inside our world. And it is indeed a form of life that should be respected. And it got quite hair-raising with these guys who approached him, who were known as the writers, and they were asking him all kinds of questions. And one of the things they were up against, these mysterious guys from the DIA, was the fact that they thought they were winning the NHA war. The intelligence behind these beings gave them the impression they were, but they were not. And it was a battle they seemed could never win. They could never win it. And so it was fascinating, the history of the Collins Elite. And the Collins Elite discovered that the Collins Elite were researching why it's connected to something called the UFO Air War of 1950. Collins Elite were trying to find out why the US Air Force was shooting down UFOs, because they were coming into our time space. Though, as you rightly said, Adam, there is an issue regarding nuclear. But the Collins Elite that consisted of the FBI, the US Navy, and the Army suggested that occult ritual, big occult ritual, was causing these tears in space-time for these hostile UFOs to appear. And according to Ray Boesch, he'd been shown some quite unpleasant photos of the results of human military trying to take on these NHE and not succeeding, which seems a very real issue that's going on. And the book's called Final Events by a guy called Nick Redfern, and the other book is called Co-Evolution by Alec Newald. It's a real good one. Oh, and there's that one Tony Topping wrote called I, Alien, Memoirs of a UFO Spy, and that's fantastic.
I'm going to put that, I will definitely put that in description with the link so people could find it. You know, let's what do you think about this? what part of the government doesn't want to acknowledge UFOs or aliens because we have no, in other words, we have no way to protect humanity from them, right? Is that a big thing to say? Like, well, we know they're here and there's nothing we could do about it if they decide to invade.
It didn't quite work like that. And it was Eisenhower and even maybe MacArthur, but I think it was Eisenhower who opposed this. Basically, it worked like this. I've had 40 years of this, Adam, and I move in mysterious circles. So it goes something like this. US government desperate for technology. We have in the UK a soap opera. It was on in the 80s called Minder, with a second-hand car salesman called Arthur Daly, who was a very dodgy car salesman. What he'd do is he'd sell these cars that didn't work correctly as brand new goods, as if everything was all right with them, but they weren't. And so the US government has on its doorstep the car salesman turn up from Planet Zog in the form of a UFO. And they say to us something worse. They said to the US government, well, look, we've got this marvelous UFO, one careful user. You can have it, but allow us to move in down the road in the block of flats and ignore what we're doing, please. And I think that's what happened. So the US take their lovely new shiny toy, find out that's the equal to a 1900 car with a crank handle engine to start it up.
Right.
Meanwhile, they've moved in down the flat down the road and they start playing loud music. And when that happens, all the other aliens turn up to tell them to turn the music down. That is a very basic kindergarten. I hope it didn't sound too wishy-washy, but it gets the point over of what's going on. Right. There's some alien Cold War going on in the skies above us, whereby what they allowed to happen has backfired horrifically, and we've now got some sort of alien NATO out there that's having none of this, because something is going on behind the scenes that should not have been happening, that is corrupt, and they've allowed that corruption to happen for whatever reason that is. It got to that's as furthest as I dare go with it, Adam, or I think I wouldn't be sat here, I would be dead. It really, really is in an area now where we get into a grey zone where one can no longer talk about it at all. But basically, that appears to be what is going on. I know only the other night, Adam, I literally filmed a UFO coming in over me. They've repeatedly come in over the flat. They're repeatedly around me. I think they're coming from bases in the ocean, in the Irish Sea, actually. So the liaison just trucks on with them, but one has to be very careful what one says, because not all people are your friend in all this, Adam. They are not at all. And that goes for aliens as well.
Yeah, it's like when I was trying to dig information on this Dulles. There was a thing where a gentleman was below ground in Dulles, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. He worked there. There was a dispute between himself and some special forces soldiers and some aliens underground. And no matter where I dig for that, it's like a stone wall. Can't find anything else about it. I mean, the guy allegedly committed suicide. It looked like it might have been a propped murder. It's mind-bending information, and you want to say it's bullshit, but it's at the same time you want to say that when you go to inquire about it, they're not very forthright with discussing it.
No, the U.S. military in all this are a force to be reckoned with. With any UFO that crashes with aliens in it that are not of this earth, the US military are very scary. And it could be possibly, Adam, that you have guests of the US military from other worlds. They're quite formidable. They know that the British government as well, with its special forces. I mean, interestingly enough, I was speaking to a guy who was in the special forces in the UK. It was verified by some people who were at a conference, and he seemed quite legitimate. But very interesting what he was saying about the fact that he had a high security clearance, but when it comes to UFOs, he said he just couldn't get any information at all. It's very, very secret, and the secrecy continues, and all for the wrong reasons. There again, Adam, as long as we've got a banking, corrupt financial system in place, as you said at the beginning of the show there, and a whole doctrine based on hidden occult values and the esoteric, there is no way there's going to be disclosure. It's just a mess, and I fear for the planet and humanity, because it's just getting messy at the moment. And there must be a higher purpose for these ET being here. I think there surely is. And I think that, I just think there's great hope for humanity, Adam. There is hope. But it's to do with them building a roadmap for us as to where to go and what to do, it would appear, whether any form of dictatorship likes it or not. That appears. That can't be stopped. But there again, they liaise behind the scenes, these ET, about what humanity sees of them and where they go. And where we go with it. We're being controlled. I definitely agree as to what we see of this, what we're allowed to see, definitely.
I agree. And I think again, in the near future, again, the billionaires are going to space. I say this a lot. You're not stopping them. Jeff Bezos from Amazon's going up. He's bringing celebrities. And if he sees something, he's not going to have a podcast. He's going to create a complete network around that, because for him, that's a profit. Right. He'll make a television show out of it, a heartbeat, reality show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there could be some celebrities who are contact experiencers. My book is in the hand of a very famous celebrity at the moment. I won't comment on who that is, because my word is my bond, and I do not comment. You've got to honor that. So, it's in the hands of a famous celebrity. They have probably had contact experiences due to who they are, but they will be keeping that quiet. But they're trying to fathom out what's gone on and why. I think somebody like Elon Musk may have had contact experiences for all the right or wrong reasons. It's going on. It's happening. It's happening with actors, pop stars, maybe even yourself, Adam. It's certainly happened to me. And the trend is certainly changing, but we do not know what they are bullshit circus really is quite laughable, isn't it? And it really is quite pantomime to witness that.
I predicted in the next 5 years, it's going to go from we don't know what they are. They're going to have to. I'm starting to see the trend that they're speeding up disclosure, and again, a lot of that to do with the billionaires going to space. But I have something. I have to believe it at some other point that maybe something's coming. We're aware of it, and we have to speed it up.
Listen, I agree with that, Adam. You've certainly got a grasp on it, more so than more interviewers that I've had chats with. I mean, interviews can go wrong. Just in closing, Adam, here in the UK, I do the major TV shows like ITV This Morning, GB News, but interviews can go wrong. I did a recent interview, in the summer for a big organizer, a big broadcaster in the UK called Talk TV, and I ended up storming out the studio because the presenter was behaving like a prick. So we ended up storming out the studio there. Interviews can go wrong, but I'd like to think, Adam, that on the whole, it's been pretty good for me. The book's out. I'm very pleased with the work of that. You can look that up on Amazon. I'll certainly send you a link and all the info to that, Adam. Because I've got PTSD, I get tired very easily. So
So before we close out, I'm going to say, we'll say good night to everyone, wherever you are. Good night, good day, good evening, whatever it is for you. And I'm going to talk to Tony in post.
Thank you.